Okay, two down, four to go. We are at album number three. I think I get the first take on this, but first, Matt, run the numbers for
All
us.
right, so this is Licensed to Ill by the Beastie Boys. It comes in at number 70 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 8 in 1986, number 498 of all time. It's the Beastie Boys' second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums behind Paul's Boutique, which we're going to cover in this season. This also made Rolling Stone's list along with Janet Jackson at number 192. And the Beastie Boys on Best Ever Albums are ranked as number 136 of overall artist rankings.
Well, I think I'll start by saying I don't think I've listened to License to Ill all the way through since I was about maybe 19 years old. I've listened to it plenty of times all the way through, but it's not the Beastie Boys album that, I would listen to. It's also remarkable, guys, how the Beastie Boys sort of reinvented themselves as serious capital S musicians, right? Like conscious, because it was a journey for them, right? And I know they disavowed like this era of their career a little bit because they felt they were frivolous. But yeah, this is basically like frat boy
Well, they're so
rock.
young too.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. And it's not. This is not a negative, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just the elements that became part of the serious Beasties, right? Like choice, ability to pick samples, like Rick Rubin, like all production style, like all over this. There's still a little bit of overlap here with like what Rick Rubin was doing with Run DMC, and by the time like Paul's Boutique and stuff like that comes out, right? They kind of had gone into full like connoisseurs of their own samples and did not seem to be an homage necessarily of, a little bit of what Run DMC is doing and a little bit of, rap group as rock band. I guess is a little bit of what the Beastie Boys vibe was here, right? The chaos and, running wild and opening for Madonna, I know was part of it. But it really does stand out that that part of their DNA, like the choice samples and the craftsmanship and, even the beginnings of some of like the standard, we even mentioned one earlier in the show, right? Like drop, the comes in like multiple Beastie Boys songs are here. Mm-hmm. But also you've got songs like Girls and She's Crafty, right? Which is about like a girl getting over on you, and you got to fight for your right to party, and Hold It Now, Hit It, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that like you would imagine like 19-year-old guys sitting around a room in the 80s and 90s and 00s, having been a 19-year-old guy sitting around in a room, right, in the late 90s. This is the type of stuff that probably doesn't age well if someone had a camera or a mic in there, but like for generations of 19-year-old males, right, was part of the vernacular, and it's in album form. It's got a ton of songs that I think are played consistently for the Beasties, even if they've sort of disavowed them to some degree, like Girls, Fight for Your Right, She's Crafty, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Paul Revere. They're probably the Brass Monkey, right? They're like probably the ones that, were in on the radio standard pretty much all the time for me. I grew up in the shadow of New York, so the Beastie Boys are also a definitively New York band. New York or Tibet, I guess, later are the two like areas where it seems like they're from. But they're a New York hip hop band. But the white elephant in the room is that they're the white rappers in the room, right? Yep. So they have enough streetwiseness to be streetwise, but they're also like three Jewish guys from a different part of New York. So it really gives the full view of Brooklyn, right, at the time, because you got Run DMC in one area and you got the Beasties in the other, right? But they come together under the Def Jam label. I've got more to say, but once again, I'm trying not to overstep and leave nothing behind. So I would this is a thumbs up. I'm familiar with enough with the Beasties that I find them to get a little bit more interesting later. But as a debut album, and as Josh said, for the age that they're at, it is kind of remarkable how fully formed they are as a sound, right? Even if their lyrics come and a little bit of that like call and response.
Yep.
Beastie stuff is here, but I find it becomes way more almost like a script in future albums. They deviate from it a little bit more here, that it doesn't seem as much like and now I'm going to pass the mic to you, and now I'm going to pass the mic to you, like hard and fast, right? This is a little bit more seemingly spontaneous. So that's one take I want to say too. So I guess it would be Josh, right? You got the second take?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've heard this album many times, and it's been a while since I listened to it. Yeah, the DNA for them is here. It's all here. Their vocal delivery, which is kind of a hallmark of them, the back and forth that they do, the finishing each other's sentences, and just kind of their personalities of the three of them. That's all here, and it's fun. It's like a fun snapshot of what they were like when they were young, and just being full of energy, and that all comes through on the album. There's definitely like a sense of humor. You could say juvenile humor on some of the tracks or some of the lines, but like Girls, or I don't know, Fight for Your Right to Party. I mean, that is an example of that, but yeah.
What's your favorite line in that song, guys? Because there's a lot of memorable ones in there, right? So I always
when
remember
he says,
"Fight for Your Right."
Your mom threw away your best porno mag. Is
yeah,
the one
I was
that
gonna
always comes
say
to mind from
that
me. Yeah.
hypocrite smokes 2 packs a day.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
So what was I gonna say? The sampling is here. I think it's kind of in its infancy as well, but they're definitely. I mean, I picked up the opening to Led Zeppelin right off the bat in Rhymin' and Stealing, and there's a lot of other songs that we've listened to along the way that they take and put in here. I think the song structure is pretty clever for the most part. I kind of like the songs that are not the more novelty songs. I mean, or I should say the more popular songs like Fight for Your Right, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Girls. Those are kind of like one set of songs, but I like the ones that are more like pure hip hop, like Rhymin' and Stealin' or Paul Revere, or the new style, Slow and Low, something like that.
Can I add one trivia question that I forgot to put in mine, guys?
Oh, sure.
You know who plays the guitar on No Sleep Till Brooklyn?
I only do because I have it up, but I didn't know that before.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's always one that cracks me. It's Slayer's Kerry King is who plays the guitar on that. Yep. So
interesting.
Yep.
I guess Brass Monkey would be another one that's an example of kind of a more like novelty crossover, and that's the thing too with them, is like they brought hip hop more into the white audience. I would say, and some of those songs, I mean, Fight for Your Right got a lot of play on MTV, and I think No Sleep Till Brooklyn as well, and I think that brought, the hip-hop exposure as well. So they're definitely like an important band for hip-hop, especially in these early stages, and this album it's worth listening to, and I enjoyed it. But like John said, their later albums, they get more complex, they get more mature, they get I think they just get better at what they do overall. So this is a thumbs up from me, and yeah, it's recommended.
It gets compared to like a punk album quite a bit, and I think that's a very good analogy with where they're at this stage, right? Because it's more simple than what they do later, but there's an energy and a rawness to them that later they become a little bit more calculated, not in a bad way, but they're more self-aware, which is good for them as people, but does take a certain amount of energy away, right? So
well, they started off as a punk band, so it makes sense that this is kind of like the bridge to what they would become. So yeah, I mean, this is another band I vividly remember this on MTV. Fight for Your Right in particular was just like omnipresent on that video, and these guys were cool. You'd watch that video, and like they were just like they certainly had the frat boy thing going on, but like they were pulling off this image and this attitude that was just super confident, and like punk, and it was really engaging, especially as like a kid watching that, just be like, what the heck, I've always liked their voices. I mean, you guys talked about the call and response. I've always liked that in with groups, different hip hop acts that have done that, incorporated that. It just adds so much depth, I think, to the hip hop sound, and I kind of like that. I think Jurassic 5 is really good at that. That's another band that kind of the riffs off of that, and I've always liked that. So and they do that a lot. Now you're right. I think I'm not as familiar. See, Beastie Boys albums that I actually owned this one. I know Paul's Boutique pretty well, and oddly enough, the only other Beastie Boys album that I ever owned was To the Five Boroughs, which came out much later, like in the early 2000s. Yeah. So I'm really interested to get into like Ill Communication, Check Your Head, and Hello Nasty, if we cover all of those, because I know that those are kind of like, that's where they start to really.
We will cover 3 of the 4, I believe. Yeah.
Actually, I did own Check Your Head for a minute, and then I traded it away for something else that probably was a bad move on my end. I had a couple of moments like in high school where I like either sold or traded albums, and most of them were not good decisions on my part. So, but I can't say that like.
Can you catalog those, Matt? Because that would be a great segment.
Yeah, I can tell you which ones I got. I can tell you which ones I got rid of. I can't tell you exactly what I traded them for, but I can take a guess. But Check Your Head. I might have traded that for Bad Motor Finger by Soundgarden, which actually wasn't as
That's not
bad
a terrible
of a trade. No, as bad of other one. Like but I also think I sold the Chronic for like $5. Like so that was bad. I bought that one later on. But
there's people listening that are like, oh, you made a killing on that, not realizing that like CDs cost like $100 back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so. That's fair. So this album I do like. There's tons of energy, attitude, and I love the flow of the back and forth. It is pretty sparse, but it's also like early 80s kind of hip hop.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of space on here. There's not, the production certainly gets better in subsequent albums with them. I think it suffers a little bit from its length. Stuff towards the end starts to blend together for me a little bit. But the stuff that's strong really, really hits for me. I think the opening, that drum beat, that drum kicking in with Ryman and Steelin', which is the beginning of When the Levee Breaks, is just awesome. I love the way this album opens. Ryman and Steelin' is like, here we are, like we've landed, and that's like that's the Beastie Boys sound right there. With incorporating some like a classic drum beat. And I think the singles "Fight for Your Right," "No Sleep Till Brooklyn," where they incorporate that rock, that obviously really respond to those. I like the new style, and so the novelties, Girls and Brass Monkey. I've always liked that. They're kind of goofy. Like that's the other thing. This is a goofy album, right?
Yeah.
These guys, there's humor in here, but they are clearly. It sounds to me like a group of guys that just got together in the studio with they landed a bunch of money, and they were just like, let's just fuck around for a couple weeks or whatever, but when they do that, and in doing so, they've also created a sound and an image and the beginnings of a band that got that turned out to be really great, and they turned out to be really influential, and so overall I think this is probably an uneven album. I'm still a thumbs up on it. I don't think it's uneven to the point where I'm going to say it's a thumbs in the middle at all, but they're refined. This isn't a fully formed this sound or group, but they certainly come through. I know when Paul's Boutique comes, I know that album pretty well, and I that's, man, what a jump that they make between this album and that one. So yeah, I've also heard stories about them kind of renouncing some of the messaging, the misogyny of this record.
Well, the original name of the album is pretty infamously like unreleasable, right?
Oh,
you guys
really?
are aware of that story, right?
No, what is that? What was the original?
Oh, I mean, it's like, let me put it this way: it's such a bad title that I can't even say it on the podcast.
Wow.
And they held on to it for a while until, I know we shit on records, right? Like record companies, but I would say that Columbia Records was completely right in their idea that they could not release the album under the title that the Beastie Boys apologized, and it does show, that humans can grow, right? And also of the era. But yeah, if like I said, I'm not going to mention it here, but a Google is pretty infamously going to tell you what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So the other story I always remember about this album, the other The other thing that I always remember about this, Matt, is they recorded a version of like a Beatles song for this, but Michael Jackson wouldn't let them release it. I'm trying to remember what song
the
it
title?
is.
Oh my-
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you guys didn't know that?
No.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty infamous story. Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, there's a teaser there for you.
Well,
But you also have to think these guys are basic.
yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
I was gonna say the title is "Don't Be an F Word." Gay slur.
They're basically they're in high school. They just got out of high school, right? You said they're like 19. You know, this is a bunch of high school clowns that are just like goofing around and stuff. You know?
Adam Horovitz was born in 1966, so this album was released in 1986.
So
he would have just turned he would have just turned 20 because he was born Halloween of 1966, and this was released in looks like November of 1986.
November of 86. Yeah, and it was recorded in 86 as well. So yeah, they're still pretty young and stupid and whatever. But like, I don't know. Overall, I'd say thumbs up. But I can't imagine that this is. I'm surprised actually that this is ranked number 2 as the second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums for the Beastie Boys. That kind of surprises me.
I mean, it's pretty remarkably influential with the sampling they do. You know, it really is one of the first albums that has this level of sampling. Right in it.
Well, and then they take it. Then they put it on.
They
put it on steroids on the next album. You know,
right?
That's
exactly
like insane. But yeah, this is like it samples Led Zeppelin. I think there's Creedence in here towards the end. I forgot that they sampled some Creedence. What is it? This Low Rider. Who is that? Is that War? They sampled that on Slow Ride.
Was it Down on the Corner they covered? Was that what it was?
Yeah, that guitar part. So
yeah.
I think they even because they sampled Mr. Ed, the Mr. Ed theme song. So yeah. So yeah. I'm excited to listen to the Beastie Boys albums that I'm not familiar with, which are mostly I think they're kind of '90s records. So yeah, this is they're still forming their identity here, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah. I was just looking too. Adam Yauch is apparently 2 years older than the rest of them, so he was about 22 when this album came out.
Oh, so what's his excuse?
It was of its time, right, and stuff like that. But no, it's. I don't want to just focus. I don't want to just focus on that. It's like I said, the Rick Rubin production is here too that I think of in conjunction with Run DMC, and he would of course grow to be a hugely influential producer. But
right,
by the way, Matt, the song that they covered from the Beatles was "I'm Down," was the song that Michael Jackson blocked. So I finally looked that up. So
on this album,
it was supposed to be on the album. They recorded I'm looking now because I remembered the story from like another podcast I listened to. But yes, it says they recorded a loose rendition of the Beatles' "I'm Down" for the album, which included sampling of the original song. But the track was pulled at the last minute due to legal disputes with Michael Jackson, who owned the Beatles' publishing rights.
Well, Michael Jackson must not have cared of all the Beatles samples that happened in the next record because that was way more than just one song. Right. That was like, jeez. Yes. So, yeah.
There you go. So
interesting.
Yeah, thumbs up for me on this one. Certainly influential, and I enjoyed it. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff to come from them as well.